um, honorable guest on one of these AMAs. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I'm very excited to have Matt here because he can answer any of your questions on any area of Ethereum. I'm sure he has strong opinions on many interesting things happening around protocol. And before we dive into your questions, I wanted to get more of Matt's background to learn a bit more about you, to give people context on where you're coming from, what do you do. So I wonder what's your story, if you don't mind talking about yourself for a few minutes there. What's your background? What you've been doing before Ethereum? What brought you to the core development? Yeah.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Mario. Glad to be back with you guys. It's been a while since I've got a chance to talk with the EPF program, but I've sort of been keeping track of what you've been up to. It's been awesome. I've seen some of you guys contributing to repos that I look at, and I love seeing that. So yeah, super excited to be talking to you. I guess a good place to start with my story is when I sort of my first interaction with Ethereum was through a Software Engineering Daily podcast. Funnily enough, was listening to a podcast with Kevin Owocki, founder of Gitcoin. At the time, Gitcoin. I mean, this was 2017 or so. Gitcoin was like very much a premier project in Ethereum, and I think if you look at the number of people that Gitcoin has onboarded to the Ethereum ecosystem, it's been extremely high. And I was one of those people. So I listened to this podcast. And at the time, I was in university and we were thinking about what we wanted to do for this big Capstone project that was coming up in a couple quarters. And listening to his podcast, and he was talking about this way of paying people with cryptocurrency to do development tasks. I thought that was a really interesting concept. And having had a lot of experience in e-commerce growing up, selling things on eBay to make money on the side while I was a kid, I realized that there was a big problem with dealing with disputes in these types of ecosystems, these like peer-to-peer marketplaces. So immediately, like my friend and I messaged Kevin. We were like, "Hey, really cool project. What happens when someone says they did the work and the person paying for the work says they didn't do the work? Like, what do you do?" And he was like, "Yeah, that's a good point. Honestly, we just pay off the people so that they just go away." Because this is a problem that we haven't figured out yet. And I don't know, to me, like solving the dispute resolution, like I had been burned a few times on eBay with this process. And so it was sort of like near and dear to me. And that was a really exciting project to me. So we hacked together some ideas for this Capstone project at university. And I got involved with another project. There was like sort of Gitcoin, and there was a different project called Bounties Network at the time. They're doing kind of the same thing, but Bounties Network was a more general purpose platform, and Gitcoin was more of a development platform. So I got working with the Bounties people pretty closely, and we built this project. And it was probably a terrible project. Like, we're university students, we have no idea what we're doing. It was like, I don't know if you know this meme of the Cheeto holding the door closed. That's like probably what it felt like with all these like Docker composes put together. So we put this thing together. We were really excited about it, and I was going to go work at some Silicon Valley company when I graduated, and I was just like, after this project, talking to that team, and I was like, "Hey, this is cool. How can I keep working on this on my free time? Because I really like Ethereum and this project. Like, I care about dispute resolution." And they were like, "I mean, why would you work on this in your free time? Like, we'll just hire you." And I was like, "Wait, I could actually work." That never even crossed my mind that I could like work for this like fake internet money company as a full-time engineer. So we did some interviews. They hired me, whatever. I was a full stack engineer for the Bounties Network. I was doing mostly front end engineering, which I had never done before. So I'm like frantically going through this like React tutorial project, just trying to figure out like how am I going to contribute to this project as a full time engineer. So I do that, and that lasts for about 6 months. This is like end of 2018, and Ethereum price collapses to like $80. And I was like, I knew it. This isn't a real thing. Fake internet money is going to go back where it came from to zero. And I was working at Consensus. That's where these projects were based. And so Consensus went through this big like restructuring, a lot of layoffs. We had grown, I don't know, through that bull market to almost 1,200 people. And we started cutting. And my team was one of the teams that got cut. That project got cut. and we were looking for the next thing to do. And around that time, like Ethereum 2.0 was sort of the big rage. And there was a lot of people who were like deep in the ecosystem thinking like, how can we accelerate Ethereum 2.0? Because this is how Ethereum is going to compete with EOS and, you know, those other like really important chains. So I connect with some people in this R&D department that was spinning up a consensus, and we talk about it. And we're like, okay, yeah, you know, there's this thing, Ethereum 2.0 phase 2. We were talking about phases. Like phase 0 was launched the beacon chain. Phase 1 was like, you know, some sort of like data availability layer. Phase 2 was supposed to be sharded execution. And they were like, look, literally no one has looked at Ethereum phase 2, Ethereum 2.0 phase 2. Like Vitalik wrote one post about it, but, you know, everyone is working on the beacon chain. So if, you know, you could just like go and look at that, maybe you could do something useful there. And I didn't really have a lot of experience with like virtual machines or execution. Like I really barely knew how the EVM worked, to be frank. And this was like a learning opportunity for me in some ways. So it really took me 6-12 months to bootstrap into understanding the execution model of Ethereum. And I think it was like a cool introduction because a lot of people who come into Ethereum and the blockchain space, they sort of like look at what exists and they're like, this is the EVM, this is the blockchain, let me learn these things. And I kind of did that, but I also had the opportunity to look at Ethereum more from the perspective of first principle. Like we want to execute things in relation to a global database. You know, how would we do that? And I was able to think about it in terms of like constantly trying to think of how my own virtual machine would work, because we were looking at eWASM at the time, which was an Ethereum flavored WASM. And so I spent about a year working on projects related to that. And that was like mostly a development opportunity for me. Like we wrote a couple of research posts, but I don't know if we contributed that much overall to the discourse. And it makes sense because Ethereum phase 2 was like many years away, even at the time that we were working on it. And after like 1.5 years, the roadmap for Ethereum started becoming clear. Like we're going to launch the beacon chain. I think we launched the beacon chain. We're going to do the merge. We're going to combine this proof of work layer with this proof of stake layer. And this like sharded execution layer like doesn't really make as much sense. Like we're starting to have some problems with how efficient we can make the proofs and how do we deal with account abstraction in these situations. And so that's kind of when I was like, okay, I feel like I want to contribute to Ethereum and I want to like see contributions be accepted into this project rather than spinning my wheels doing research on something that's like many years away. So I started contributing to Go Ethereum. This must have been 2020. And I started working on the type transactions proposals. And that was just like a stroke of luck because we were working on account abstraction at the time. And we were thinking, you know, if we're going to do account abstraction the right way, we want to have a custom transaction type to do this thing. So I'm like trying to push for this EIP 2930, which was the access list transaction. And I was like, yeah, you got this access list transaction. That's a cool idea. But like the way you're doing it, it would be cooler if you had like a type byte on it. So I was like helping with this like type transaction concept. And, you know, that 20, no one uses the 2930 transaction. That one like is really kind of irrelevant in like the great scheme of Ethereum. But that sort of like teed me up to work on EIP 1559, which ended up being like kind of an important EIP that you probably heard of. So after I worked on 2930, I started working on 1559, contribute to that for like quite a while, and was able to like get that merged into Geth. And at that time, like I was starting to like be more involved with core development, going to a lot of all core devs calls, talking with the Geth team on like somewhat of a regular basis, you know, every couple of months or so. Like I'm still an outside contributor, but I see these people at conferences and people were starting to make fun of me. They were like, you know, well, you're always around, but you're not with us, or you're like not on the team. Like, I don't understand. Like, what do you do? And I started to feel bad that people were making fun of me, that I wasn't like on the inside. And so I started talking to Peter and Martin, and I was like, hey, can I have a job at in your team? Like, I kind of like your project. I could learn some more stuff. And you know, fortunately, I had contributed for long enough that they sort of like saw my contributions and they were like, sure, yeah, it makes sense. So that was kind of like the progression of me onto the Go Ethereum team. That took, you know, from 2018 until I guess I joined 2.5 years ago. So that must have been 2022. So, you know, I spent about 4 years at Consensus doing research and like kind of being on the outside. And, you know, I don't know, I say outside. It's not like I wouldn't say like the Go Ethereum team is necessarily the inside anymore, but there is like this kind of concept of like being more of like an external contributor, coming to all core devs and like not being like in the thick of the like protocol research and development. And so it took a while to break in, but now that I've been in, I've been able to like work on a lot of the hard forks. So I've implemented quite a few of the EAPs for this coming one. Pectra implemented a couple things in Cancun, and have just really been involved with like the day-to-day like protocol shipping operation. And yeah, that's kind of like how I've gotten here today. I've picked up a lot of responsibilities over the years. I'm an editor on the EIP repository. I manage the JSON RPC execution APIs. I manage some of the engine API repositories, and yeah, trying to lead quite a few efforts. So there is no shortage of work. Like I feel like there's like too many things to be doing. So I'm happy that this program exists to try and develop some more people to take on those tasks. Anyways, that's a whole bunch about me. I'm happy to answer some questions about that or about anything related to Ethereum because it's kind of a crazy project.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. It was great. Yeah, thank you for walking us through all of that. It's yeah, all the way from 2018 to the present, all of the stuff you've been working on. Yeah, and I had no idea that you started actually on these bounties and doing front end out of all things. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because
Um,
like Kevin and I are actually kind of friends now. Like we both live in Boulder, so I see him pretty frequently. And I just like remind him every once in a while, I'm like, you're my dad, basically. Like you brought me here, you created me. And he just kind of laughs. But I think it's cool. Like there's definitely people in the ecosystem that bring a lot of people in. I think Piper is one of those people. Like Piper has really brought a ton of people into the ecosystem. He's the godfather of this program in
yep.
most ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He brought Josh, just confirming here, and started the whole EPF. So yeah, but also yeah, next time I see Kevin, I will thank him for bringing you in. I had no idea about that. And yeah, also, so one thing to add actually, important thing that you missed in your past and people are curious about is where the name comes from. Well, I kind of know the answer, but yeah, people are curious.
Right.
How did you become light client?
So back into my university days, we had some classes where we got to use GitHub, and those were like the coolest classes because that was like what real engineers use. So we were on GitHub, and I don't know, I probably had my full name as my GitHub handle, and I saw these people with cool GitHub handles, and I was like, I want that. Like, I want to be cool. I need the aesthetic of being like, I can't ship code if I don't have a good name. And so I wrote these bots that would like go through a ton of like permutations of words. Like I was just shooting in the dark, literally anything, and I couldn't find shit. So I am like sitting here, still like weeks trying to look for this username. Can't find any usernames, and I had like an old gamer tag on Xbox that was like related to color. So I thought like maybe I could do like a name related to color because color is cool. Like I think I love colors. Who doesn't? And I obviously couldn't find any permutation related to color for sure. So what I did was I did a hyphen between every letter. So it ended up as C-L-O C-O-L-O-R. And the people I was working with were getting really tired. After it took like 1 year, but like after a while, people were like, we cannot tag you on issues or PRs anymore. This is unreal. And so I really needed to find a new username. And at that time, I was working with a guy named Joseph Chow. He is like very OG Ethereum person, not as involved anymore, but he was at DevCon 0 and involved with Consensus, like, top first 25 employees or so. And he had the username on GitHub Ethers. And I was like, this is like such a cool name. Like, you've named yourself after the project. So I was starting to like look at things that were related to Ethereum. And I was like, okay, proof of work, proof of stake, way, just like all the like the Ethereum vocabulary. And, I think I picked my name up in 2019. And at that time, light clients, I feel like that was like the first emergence of people being excited about light clients. Like people had talked about it earlier on, but I feel like 2019 people were like, okay, we're so close, we're going to ship it, it's here. And I was like, okay, let me get in a little bit early and pick this username. So I picked light client. It was a cool concept. I like the idea. And then it absolutely died off for like 5 years. or 4 years. And so nobody was like actually shipping or working on light clients. And now, it feels a little bit like we're back into this. People are getting closer. We've got Helios from A16Z. There are people sort of working on light clients. And so now it's confusing because it's actually a term that people are using again. And it's never clear, like, do you mean the guy or do you mean the technology? But I think it's nice. Like it's kind of nice because it keeps me a bit anonymous. Like it's hard to look me up on the internet, which I like. So if you search like light client Ethereum, then you just get like a page about what a light client is. And then you're like, okay, this isn't a real person.
You're the most real light client in Ethereum right now. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for elaborating on that. It's a important part of your superhero backstory. Um, yeah. Awesome. I want to, yeah, of course, like folks, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I have some more questions for Matt, but I want to make sure you guys have space to ask anything. Yeah, Rory,
Yeah, I was just
go
curious,
ahead.
what improvements would you make with the EIP process? I know Tim, sent out a post on ETH Magicians a while ago, kind of some proposals he had in mind. But since you're an editor, what do you think could be the future for the whole EIP process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are two stages to the answer. The first is near term, and I think near term we're sort of close to the optimal situation. I feel like I think where we're lacking is we're lacking in EIP editors. So it's kind of a call out. If anybody is interested in contributing, check out EIP1. There's an EIP, I think it's 5656. It describes what an EIP editor does. I would love to add some more people as an editor. I think we're a little bit bottlenecked by that now. So in general, I think the process that we have is like quite lightweight. The EIP editors are just making sure that the process is sort of being followed, that the stages that the EIP needs to go through, and that, the text of the EIP makes sense. So I think that that's okay. But longer term, I would like to see a lot more structure around this. And the reason I say longer term and not now is that I don't think that we have we don't have enough people in the ecosystem to do what I imagine. And so I imagine something kind of like how the IETF works, where you have different tracks of work. And, in core development, like we kind of have like some different things. Like we have networking, and that's like a core client related track. We have the EVM, we have the consensus layer, we have PBS, like a lot of these concepts. And I think that it would make sense if we sort of had people that were involved in those areas. And not only would they review EEPs that are related to that area, but they would actually be like a group that's focusing on who else is working on this area. So if you're the chair of the EPBS track, then you might help direct people who are coming in or people who are like trying to ship projects related to this. And I think that's very different than what we have today, because if you're working on PBS, you kind of just like throw things onto the EEPS repository, you like throw it onto all core devs, but there's no direction. It's like hard to get feedback. And I think that if we really want to like continue scaling in terms of more people involved in the ecosystem, then we need to add a little bit more of structure around this. And I think that we need to have leaders in the ecosystem who are able to keep people on track and to make sure that questions are answered and that EIPs move through the process at like the correct pace. So I would love to see that happen later on.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for answering that. Folks, if you have any more questions, feel free to raise your hand. Um, yeah, I have a few more things I wanted to ask, like in general, because you've been working on a bunch of hard problems which are being still pushed forward for years, like 3074, EOF, and a bunch of stuff you've been contributing to. I'm wondering, like, what keeps you going? What keeps you motivating, especially when working on things which are like these long-term projects caught in the big coordination game schemes? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a few main things. I mean, number one, in the darkest moments, I do try to remember that the technology that we're working on is something that's going to be useful for humanity. Do I think that pump.fun is like the way that we're going to connect with the masses? No, but I think that eventually we're going to find a way to use this technology, because this is something that didn't exist before. Having technology that is technology that can be used to run programs that are not controlled by anyone. This is something that there's going to be uses for. I'm pretty confident in that, and I'm excited by it. So that's one thing. Two is friends. I have a lot of friends in the ecosystem now. It would be weird to just leave the ecosystem because all of my friends are kind of still working on it. I really enjoy the people here. It's fun. I have a great time. It would be really hard for me to work at a regular tech company because I can't send Pepe memes nonstop. I mean, maybe I can, but like, it's just not the same. It's just different. And I would probably get fired really quickly for being, yeah, it's like open source development in this decentralized way is fun. And I think it like fits my skill set a lot. And also, I don't know. I mean, how do I keep working on 3074 or whatever? Like, there's a bit of ego there. Like, I think it's something that's like so close to my personality at this point that I want to ship it because I want to close that chapter of like my development career. And I think it's like super useful. Like, I'm excited about improving the UX for Ethereum. I think that these is like the right tracks, but why did I not drop off from working on this project like 1 year ago whenever it seemed dead? Because I think that it was just like unclosed, like an unfinished chapter for my development book. And so that's probably a great reason to keep working on things, but it's a real reason. And it's a real reason that a lot of people are shipping things in Ethereum. Like whenever this ecosystem is getting bigger and more mature and people are dedicating years of their lives to things. And it's like important to realize whenever you're talking about like hard forks and like what's going to go into hard fork, you have to think about the people behind the proposals too, because it's difficult whenever you've spent 2, 3, 4, 5 years on a project to be like perfectly impartial to its inclusion. So I try to not be too loud of a voice in terms of like, should it be included or not? I try to let the other people make those decisions because I know that like personally, I would obviously say it should be included. I would say it should have been included in the London hard fork when we proposed it. But that's why we have this process to like try and counteract people's egos.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for that, Matt. That's inspiring. Katya, yeah, have a question?
Yeah, hi Matt.
Hey.
What hot topic are you currently working on in Geth? Any specific?
I mean, I'm kind of the lead on the Prague hard fork, so there's it's a lot of busy work, honestly, and I haven't had the opportunity to like sit down and like really develop a big feature in Geth in the last few months. I mean, you can say that the EIPs in the Prague hard fork are big features, I suppose. So that's mostly what I've been working on. I have developed a lot of the system contracts for this hard fork and the last one. So that's like the EVM assembly system, the contracts that get called by the system. So that was probably the last like bigger thing that I've been focused on. But yeah, honestly, I've been trying to be very close to like the like operational side of Geth and the core protocol for the last year or so, rather than like, sinking my head into the sand and developing a project.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. We have Jez, Visa, and Aman asking in the comments.
Yeah, I can respond to JS Visa.
Yeah, I was going to read. If you're reading that, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, let me just read it. So he's just asking, based on my commit history, it looks like I've shifted a bit from core development in Geth to more research role on the EEPS. And how does that role come about? Is there a lot of coordination on the EEPS? Compared to collaborating with Peter, what are the differences with Vitalik? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, good question. Okay, so I would say I wouldn't say that I've shifted from like core development to Go Ethereum, because honestly, I don't think I have ever been that core of a Geth contributor. And what I mean by that is like I came into the project like late by terms of how long the project has existed. Like this project began in 2014. So I came in 2021, 2022 full time. So that's a 6-7 years of code that's been written by like extremely talented engineers. So it's hard for me and not quite as interesting to me to come in and like make huge technical contributions to very complicated pieces of the code base, like the sync, like the database. And so a place that I found like a very good niche is implementing EIPs. So my bread and butter for Geth is like the transaction format. So I've implemented like pretty much all of the transaction types. That's something that I do a lot. I do a lot of the changes to the block header. I just do a lot of like the changes to the core protocol. And that works for me because it's a role that I was kind of doing before I joined Geth. I've always been like pretty social, not in terms of like the fun social sense, but like pretty social in terms of just like talking with other core developers, seeing what's going on with them, like letting them know about what's happening in Geth or what's happening with EIPs. So I've always been interested and involved in that part of the pipeline. Like if you think about the protocol pipeline, there's like research on the left, and then you would have, maybe some more applied research where you're trying to get some benchmarks on the proposals. And then you have the development and like the actual shipping of that feature. And so I've been very much in like the development shipping phase and dabbling in the like a kind of applied research phase. So my contributions to Geth come and go. I would say the last couple of months I've been contributing more to just like fixing issues in Geth, just like trying to review things that are in the PRs, trying to improve the API. So that's like core development. And then every once in a while I have more research projects that I'm focused on. And so that has historically been account abstraction. That's been a research project of mine since 2019. I've been involved with 4.4s, the state expiry, the history expiry. I've been involved with state expiry. Like those are like, I have been more involved on the execution side of research. So as of late, like I've been the lead on the EIP 7702, which was obviously the replacement for 3074. And that's required me to make a lot of contributions to the EEPS repository. And that's required me to talk to Vitalik. And that's required me to spend a lot of time with wallet teams and talking to all the people who use accounts in Ethereum and understand what they need. And I enjoy it. Like, I think that's a cool thing to do. It's hard sometimes because these are all people that are, Vitalik is very busy. The wallet teams are very busy. They don't necessarily have time to just sit down every day and discuss how this proposal should go. And people are coming with different levels of context. Like the wallet teams really understand what a smart contract wallet is and like how people use their product, but they don't have the like 5-year history that I do and that other people do on accounts abstraction, like where accounts abstraction came from and where 3074 came from and what's possible in the core protocol. So that's something that like I've had to try and navigate, which is like, how do you lead a like research technical proposal project, which is the specification of an EIP, and get like valuable feedback from people who just don't have the context and I probably will never be able to get the context. And that's very different than like working on the Geth team, like working with Peter or Felix or Martin, because those people, like, you don't have to explain things to them. You can just say things or not even say it, and then they just like know, or they understand because they've been doing this for so long. So I would say that's like a big difference with the specification side. And Vitalik is the same way. Like, I appreciate working with Vitalik on account abstraction because he has been talking to account abstraction since 2014. He totally understands like everything that we're talking about. He really gets at a very high level and at a very low level all the things that we're talking about. So it's easy. Like the conversations are relatively short because like we don't have to go back and forth. Like we're on the same wavelength. When he says something, it's right, or it's something that I haven't thought about. And that's the same with like Peter and Felix and Martin. So I would say like it's like similar. It's just like different types of content. Okay. There's one other question in the chat. Sorry, I'll just read this one. Have you ever got self-doubt on your skills when problems you're solving is not getting solved by you and kind of stuck? Totally. I think it's like getting better now. You know, I've been working in Ethereum for 6 years now, but I would say like definitely the first 2 or 3, I felt a lot of imposter syndrome. Didn't feel like I was the right person to be solving these things. I felt weird that I was in these roles. Um, I've gotten more comfortable over time. I wouldn't say it's the healthiest of fuels, but it was definitely a fuel to like really lock in and understand things and, you know, develop myself, develop my experience, improve my abilities. So in some ways, like it pushed me, but in other ways, like, yeah, it was hard. And there was a lot of like confidence issues. And I don't like presenting at conferences in general, but like, I really didn't like presenting in conferences. When I was first starting out. I'll tell you a really funny story because I don't think there's a recording of this anywhere. But not of this meeting, but of like this event. So I went to DevCon Prague. This was 2018. I had been working at Consensus for like 3 months. And I don't know, like in crypto, like people would just give presentations all the time. It's just something that people seem to do, especially like back then when there weren't so many people. You just like go into event presentation. So I come in and they're like, hey, you've been working on this thing in React. I know you just learned React 3 weeks ago, but do you want to give a presentation at DevCon about the module you've been building? And like, I do not like public speaking. I definitely did not like public speaking whenever I was like 21 years old. But I was like, I guess I have to do this. So I went up and do it. And I mean, they put me in this room of like, that could sit like 150 people. And there were like, no joke, like 8 people in this room. And I'm mic'd up as if like it's getting it recorded and all the stuff. And I am absolutely bombing. Like, I'm just like putting so many filler words in. Anyway, so that scared me from public speaking for like a good year or two. And I still think about that. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so thankful there are no recordings of that. So I never have to like go through the pain of seeing it. But yeah, it's you're not alone if you're just coming into the space, especially if you don't have a lot of technical career experience. Then yeah, probably gonna spend some time having some imposter syndrome, unless you're just like really confident in yourself and secure, which good for you. But I would guess like a lot of people I know have like had similar similar internal battles. So I would say just like stay the course, keep working. Like at the end of the day, there's so many things to contribute to. Like if you understand yourself, you understand where you can contribute. Like I'm not Vitalik, I'm not Peter, and I'm honestly not as good of a developer as some of those people. And I'm not going to be as good of a researcher as Vitalik. And I'm not as good as a researcher as OnScar. Like there's a lot of people who are really, really smart in this ecosystem, but like I am good at making sure that PRs get merged. And I am good at just like dedicating myself and spending time on things. And I am good at like socializing and talking to different developers to understand where things are at. So find the thing that you are good at and like lean into it, because if you're good at it, then there will be a place to contribute. Okay. I think Rory was up next.
It was Dan, actually.
Yeah, Dan was first.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Hi, it's not really a competition. I wanted to ask, what's the status of 7495, the stable container? Because you mentioned Electra. Do you see it's something that is going to happen, or then we need it? Because we have projects that bring changes to CL and to specs, and I'm curious about the stable container.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, 7495 is the EIP, for those not familiar, where you make it so that the SSE container isn't broken between forks. You're sort of able to like specify what the structure of it is, and then you can continue making proofs about it in the future. So this is like a forward compatibility solution. I think it's a great proposal. I don't think it's going to go on Pectra, just because I think there are so many other things that are being slated for Pectra right now. And in terms of priority, like I would say we haven't officially included PeerDOS in Pectra still. And PeerDOS, I would say, is higher priority, honestly, than anything that's in it right now. So
EPF probably after. No, after PDAS.
EPBS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, there's a lot of priorities, and that's like the CL is really in a place where there's so many things that are pretty important. Like we also have single slot finality. Like we have a lot of things that need to be done. So that's the hard thing with stable containers. Like it's a good proposal, but it's just like, when is it the right time to do it? My guess is that Pectra won't be that time, but we'll have to see how Pectra development goes the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, it's not in the meta. It's not in the 7,600. So I thought that's the case, but you are the man to ask about this.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Rory or Bastin, or whoever feels like it. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask. So I mean, I guess ever since joining the EPF, and even before that, with the study group that we did, we've been listening to the ACD calls, and so I would say you're probably fairly active on those calls. And I'm just curious, like, are you this active as a result of being an EIP editor, and because you have your, you're just doing a lot with the different areas, and do you ever feel overwhelmed with all that you're working on? And then having to, vocally communicate on these calls.
Yeah, I definitely feel a bit overwhelmed with all of the different things. Like I feel like, I mean, this is just true for any kind of company that you work for, or any job. Over time, you gain a lot of responsibility, and you just sort of accumulate it, and you're gaining more responsibilities than responsibilities like end up becoming not important usually. So over the years, like I've just gained a lot of responsibility because I'm like willing to generally say like, let me help with this, let me do that. So now, one of those responsibilities I have is execution APIs, and I literally go on there once a month, once every 2 months, and I just try to merge PRs. And that's not as much contribution as I would like, but it's kind of like lower priority of the types of things. So yeah, there's totally a bunch of stuff that I feel a bit overwhelmed with keeping track of. So I just like try to think like like, am I blocking people? Like, are there things that I'm needing to be doing that I'm not, but is keeping people from doing their jobs? And I try to prioritize those. Because if a human being is working on something, especially a well-paid, productive human being like a core developer, then it's good to unlock them. But yeah, I am very active on the all core devs calls. I think that's a product of just going to every single all core devs call for like many years and involving myself in many of the projects. But also, like, I, for some reason, feel okay speaking my opinion, and I think there are some people who have same experience or better, and they just don't either want to, or they don't feel comfortable sharing their opinions. Maybe that's a product of like me spending a lot of time. Like, I live in Boulder, and there's a lot of core developers or researchers in Boulder. So I might have a better understanding in general about how people feel about proposals. And like I said, I talk to a lot of people, even outside in person, but like over Discord and in other calls. And so I am oftentimes like not just sharing my opinion, but like a broader opinion of people that are not coming to the call. Like the Geth team has stand-ups many times a week, and oftentimes Peter and Martin and Felix are not on the call to share their opinion, but I try to share their opinion on the call, just as like the Geth sentiment about something. So yeah, I guess I do talk a lot on the calls. I try to not be too overbearing, but yeah, for some reason I feel like my opinion should be heard. So I make it heard.
And it's great. Thanks, Bastin.
Thanks. So I wanted to ask, like, in your opinion, what's the status on light clients, and what's the near future? What does it look like, and more importantly, what's missing?
Good question. So light clients today, I think the pinnacle is Helios. So Helios is a wrapper around an ETH RPC. and it basically lets you get the data in a verifiable way. So you tell it what you want to request, and then it will go get that data and verify it against the light client that it's keeping track of. And that kind of got a bit easier with the beacon chain because now we have these sync committees. Like that system works pretty well, but it's still centralized in the sense that like we have a liveness requirement on whatever light client server you're using. And I think that that's in general okay. To me, I would rather, like, it's a lot better than what is the status quo today, which is just asking Infura or Alchemy and just trusting whatever they say. That's not great. And I think that if more people were using Helios to verify the data, that would be preferable. I think the reason that they're not, for one, people just don't care as much as like we would like them to do. So I don't really know how to solve that. Like, it would be better if the defaults were just to have a less trusted system. That's really the only way, because I don't think like most people will really understand the concept that they're getting data from a centralized source and not verifying it. So there's a bit of like UX design there that maybe could improve. Like the analogy like I always like to use is that the TLS, SSL, HTTPS, this whole project, like coming up with the lock icon in the browser was really transformational for that. Because if you didn't have that, like people look at that and they're like, okay, this is secure. And they don't know what it means. They have no clue how it actually works. Like what's secure, but like it gives them a sense of security. And so if we were to come up with some sort of UI design around verifying data, like I think that would be beneficial. But I think like maybe the reason that we haven't spent as much time on it is it's not free and it's not even cheap. Like verifying, building the proof is kind of expensive. So that's the feedback I've heard from the A16Z team, is that ETH proof is just too inefficient. And I don't think it's a bandwidth problem. Like I think that you can download the proof. I just think that computing the proof is kind of expensive. So if we were to unlock more light clients, I think that like computing the proofs is something that would be pretty useful to look into. I don't know how much better we can make it. Like we have tried to work on ETH proof, and in general, it has been like fairly performant for us. So I don't know if Verl will improve the world for this. It may not, because it's more expensive to create the proof, but that's more computational rather than disk reading. So yeah, big problems. People don't care, don't know how to communicate it, expensive to create the proofs, and I don't know. I mean, I think I would like to see someone just build a wallet that does this. That's like, very legit about being a light client. And I don't see a reason that the technology exists. It's possible. I don't know why someone hasn't done it. I think that there's funding to do it. I don't know if you're going to make millions of dollars doing it, but it would be an interesting like educational project that I would like to see.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. And Chloe had a question.
Hi. So I just curious, you mentioned before that we need more long form discussion of protocol change. And I just curious, like, why do you think that should be the case? Or how can we integrate into the current form discussion? Because we already have ACD call, breakout course, then Ethereum Research Forum, Magician Forum, and also like Discord channel. And a lot of people also discuss or fight on Twitter. So how do you think we can promote such kind of like discussion in public?
Yeah, I think it's really hard because it's so easy to just send an instant message. And that's kind of the battle that we're fighting, is why spend the time to type something out whenever you can just back and forth messages between a person or a couple people and then like get to the solution. I don't really know how to resolve that, and I think that's like why we don't have as much long form. The reason I think we need more long form is I think that writing is a way of thinking. I think once you get to a level that you're at now, I mean, we're not in grade school writing anymore. This isn't like an assignment that we're trying to turn in. This is to help us think about a problem and to organize our own thoughts and to create new thoughts. Like that's what the process of writing is to me. And I think that that's why we need more of it. Like, we spend too little time organizing our own thoughts and like really thinking about what we're talking about when we're just instant messaging each other. So I would like to see more of it. I don't know how to enforce it. Like, we could turn Discord off. I think that would help, but I think that that's like too big of a change for people. In terms of priority, you listed a lot of places that communication happens. I think number one priority is all core devs, like these synchronous calls. If you were to only like engage in one way, like engaging there is like the highest reward, because it's a quick way to like know where everyone is thinking. Like, there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to make all core devs happen. So Tim doesn't just appear for an hour and a half every 2 weeks and then like disappear. He is spending a lot of time in the background talking with client teams to understand what is a priority for them, where they're at with development. And so all core devs is like the product of that process. So when you read the agenda for all core devs, just know that like it's not just haphazard. It's also very very curated. So it's a good place to understand like where the mind share is. So that's like number one in terms of what are people thinking and doing and how can you contribute. And so then that's like a good place to figure out like where to contribute. If you were trying to contribute to something that's being talked about on all core devs, or something you're contributing is not being talked about on all core devs, like that's the place to like get in front of people. After that, like the next priority, it's like hard to say because it depends on the specific project and where those people are communicating. But I would say in general at this point, like Discord is like number two priority. I would just like mute all the channels on the R&D Discord except for the couple topics that you care about and are like active in, and follow that. And then like, I don't know, ETH Magician's like pretty far down the list at this point. We're trying to improve it, but like the reality is that the Magician's forum is not, it's not being as loved as it once was. And maybe that's an opportunity for people. Like, there's a lot of conversations and discussions that happen on Discord. Like, you can just go look at the execution dev, the future of EOA's channel right now. There's a lot of things about 7702 that's being asked, a lot of questions, and I'm giving some answers. But like, this would be a great thing to propagate back to ETH Magicians. So if someone is bored, like trying to bridge some of that more information, that could be like a useful exercise. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We have a question in the chat about Verkle trees. It's another kind of forums to open. Yeah, so what do you think? Should we wait for some binary trees, some quantum safe mechanism, or yeah, what do you think about the Verkle at the current state?
I am not allowed to comment on this because Guillaume will literally kill me if I say anything. So I will.
We will remove this from the recording.
I don't know. The Verkle boys are on my nerves a little bit with their 2935 EIP. So maybe I'm like slanted in the wrong way. I'm not sure. I think like there are good questions being asked. In general, I'm not like convinced that we need to change the course on Verkle. Like, we're still just targeting 2026 for Verkle. That's a long time. So I don't really see a problem. Like, people are going to R&D until the thing goes live on a hard fork, and I think that's the right thing to do. Like, we've pulled things out of forks weeks before the fork because something came up where we realized it wasn't as good of an idea. And so as long as there's time, like, we're going to fill that with doing research. And if something better comes along, we're going to migrate to that thing. Honestly, I'm not as involved with Verkle, so I only know like what people are talking about. I do know that there are like questions about, is this try design the best? There's ideas that we should convert the thing to binary. There's ideas that we should use different proof mechanisms. And there's some interesting ideas out there, but like they're still very early in the research phase. There's also proposals to use like really new cryptographic functions, and we're just not going to. Basically, if you're going to put a cryptographic function in Ethereum, it needs to be at least 10 years old. I think that that's like a pretty reasonable expectation. And that just means that most of the things that are being proposed are like way too young. So Verkle is staying the course for now. But yeah, people are doing research on it as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, we get more questions in the comments. Hold up. Oh, it's a lot of things. I like the question from Rahul. What are some things that were pulled out last minute?
Yeah, so there's an EIP 2315 that was removed at the last minute. I'm just going to link you this issue that describes the situation. It's kind of it's a good one. It's an interesting one. Let's see. Yeah. Let me just send this in. I would just give that a read. It gives you all the context about what happened with 2315.
Oh, it was Berlin. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, we have last 5 minutes. Yeah, we have questions from Zarathustra from JS Visa. Do you read it? Do you want to comment on some of that? The client diversity and changes.
Oh, let's see. Okay. So there is something that's happening with Ethereum core that I think is going to impact what a execution client looks like. The consensus client is a bit of a different beast. Like I think that for the very long foreseeable future, if you want to be a full node on Ethereum, you need to run a full consensus client. Like we just don't really have a way around that. There's ideas of snarking the consensus protocol, but like I said, like this, a lot of that technology is very new, zero knowledge cryptographic primitives, and it's just going to take a long time for that stuff to stabilize to actually do with the protocol itself. But on the execution layer side, there's a couple of things happening. The most important thing is stateless. As stateless becomes more real, and if and when Verl / whatever stateless mechanism we come up with ships, it's going to be a lot easier to, as a consensus client, give the execution client the data that it needs to verify the block. Right now, we've like sort of mashed these two pieces of software projects together, and the execution client is a very complicated piece of software. And a lot of the complication comes from needing to sync the state. That's a very difficult task, and we've come up with a Snap protocol to do that, and it works really well, but it's not simple. And there's a lot of code. There's a lot of threads that need to be spun up. And you have to have two peer-to-peer stacks. You've got the peer-to-peer stack on the consensus client that's doing block announcements, and verifying the consensus layer, and then you have the execution layer, and it's doing the state syncing and the transaction propagation in the pool. So I can see in the next couple of years a client popping up that is stateless and is just a drop-in library to consensus clients, and it sort of circumvents the whole engine API situation. I think that's like a pretty interesting idea, and if I were to start an execution client today, I would probably start with that, honestly, because you can do it today. You can do it with Merkle Patricia tree proofs. You can do it by downloading the state on demand. Like there's a lot of ways that you could do this. And I think it helps avoid a lot of the complexity of the execution client that's probably going to disappear. Okay, but this is more about the diversity. Okay. Advancements of parallel transaction execution. These things, I'm not sure how much it will affect the client diversity. Like light clients, to me, it's like a really interesting and important concept, but it's not really related to client diversity, because when we think about clients, I think much more about full clients. Like if you're a light client, that means you're susceptible to being tricked by a malicious majority of the network. If you're a full node, that's like the people who, in the event of some catastrophic event, are going to be able to say, I am following the chain and I know what the head of the chain is without a doubt. Do MEV, and you need the head of the chain very quickly. You need to like speed up the time it takes to verify the block. Like maybe parallel transaction execution makes sense. If you're building an L2, then you might want to have the core client be running transactions in parallel, but that's not going to impact the client diversity on L1. I don't see L1 doing parallel transaction execution like as a primitive of the core protocol, probably ever, but at least for a long time, just because I don't think that I think it's like far too complicated for us to put into the core protocol. And it's something that just makes more sense as a tool that developers use to execute their blocks faster, or certain clients use to be faster. But I don't think that it will be super meaningful in terms of client diversity.
Nice. Josh, you want to
Yeah.
finish it?
Yeah, I'll finish it up here. I got two quick questions for you. First, as the most prolific meme creator in the Ethereum community, do you have a particularly favorite meme that you've created, or alternatively, a format that you particularly enjoy?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'll try and pull it up. I don't know if I'll get it by this meeting, but I made this one. It was core developers then versus now. That was a pretty funny one.
Nice.
Lately, I'll find it and I'll send it to you guys. But lately, I've really thought this one, the silence, someone else is talking meme. That one has been pretty funny lately.
Or the
That
crab?
one has been. Sorry.
The crab silencing someone, or
Oh no, that one is really funny too. Silence brand.
silence brand? Yeah.
No, there's one that's like silence blank. So and so is talking now.
Ah,
It's like silence user, a core dev is talking.
With the
exactly. Yeah. That one is super funny.
I was expecting that you'll say the baseball, the emoji ball.
Okay, you're right. That one. Okay,
actually,
let me take that back. That one is. Oh yeah, I mean, there's just so many good ones. I will say that like the number one meme I've ever used is definitely the cowboy oof. Like when that one started popping off, I was sitting that 10 times a day in the chat. And people were like, you can't do that anymore. That's just not allowed.
Cool. And then secondarily, and a little more serious, what piece of advice would you give to somebody who is an aspiring core developer, somebody who's trying to make their way into the ecosystem, has some skills but is struggling to do so?
So I think that I've given this advice previously for EPS, but I think it continues to be relevant. And that advice is to find the tasks that people aren't doing and do them, especially if they're not fun tasks. Like there's a lot of cool things to do and you can totally contribute there, but it's going to be a lot harder to break in when you're competing with the best core developers and researchers. And if you feel comfortable with that and you feel like you can contribute, like go for it. But the way that I found success is I found success by doing the stuff that nobody else liked to do, like editing EIPs and maintaining execution APIs repo, which I'm looking for someone to take over. Like I would love to hire someone to contribute to that. It's not a fun job, but like it's a job and it's a good way to like get into the ecosystem. I would say like first and foremost, like find a way to work full-time in blockchain if you're not already. And then if you want to be in core development, like find a way to work full-time in core development, even if it's not necessarily the most Ethereum aligned, and like keep focused on like where you want to go. That was like the goal for me. Is like I was like, I just need to stay in blockchain. This was back in 2018. I think this technology is probably going to make it. I just had to keep working full time because you accumulate so much experience by just working full time versus working a non-related job, being a full stack engineer or whatever, and then in your free time doing core development. Like being able to say like, let me read the ETH Magicians forum today. That's like an hour, and it's going to take. I'm going to say that's part of my work because that's me keeping up to date with the industry. So I think you get a lot of cumulative advantage by working full-time in the space. So find a way to work full-time, find things that core developers don't like doing and do it for them because they will probably hire you. And I've seen a lot of people come into the space like doing that. Right now, testing is something that we really need and it's hard to do. It's not super fun to do, but they're kind of the most important people in the ecosystem. So if you have an aptitude for that, like that's another good place.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. I think that's a great point to finish it off with. We are a few minutes after the hour, so we gotta wrap it up here. But yeah, thank you so much again, Matt. Thank you so much, everyone. Normally, we open a discussion thread